Denise Powell from Merck. It's so nice to be with you. Thank you for making the time to chat with us.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And so, because Mother's Day is this month and it's one of my favorite and I think most important holidays, I wanted to start off just talking with you about that a little bit. If you could share a little bit about your mom and the influence that she had on your life.
Yeah, so Mother's Day is my favorite holiday. So I was raised by a single mom. So Mother's Day is that much more special for me. My mom is just my anchor, my rock. I always say she should have been a CEO somewhere, even though she only finished high school. But when I say she's the constant in my life, she has given me the firm foundation, has established this firm determination and resilience in me, and the belief that anything at all is possible. And so the best way I could describe my mom is if there's a wall, she's going through it, she's going over it or around it, but the wall is not stopping her. And that's one thing she's always instilled in us. And with a lot of love, but she really instilled that in us. In addition to a firm foundation around education, my mother knew that education is just the key access, and you have to stay focused on that. And because without it, you can't even gain access to do some other things that you're looking to do in your life. So just a phenomenal person.
So did you inherit all of those qualities?
I inherited them. I think they were just bred in me. But most of it is honestly by observation. Even though I think bred it, just watching my mother. As a kid, it was my brother and I. My mother at any given moment always had at least 3 jobs, literally. She didn't miss an event at school, whether it be parent-teacher conference. If she had to make the parent-teacher conference at 6:30 in the morning so she could meet with the teacher in person, that's what she would do. So when there was a will, there was a way. But she was always very, very engaged. So yes.
Now, I know from reading up on you that one of the particular things that she taught you was about a sense of purpose. And, what I found particularly interesting about that is I think, many of us know how empowering that is and how much happier it makes somebody to, identify your purpose and try to align your life with it. But what seemed different was that she also taught you to reevaluate it every 5 years, I believe.
Yep.
Well, what's that about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. First and foremost, I go back to, and I guess I was a very literal child. I always remember my 3rd grade teacher had asked us to write down what we wanted to be. So most people wrote, a doctor, an engineer, a writer. I wrote down I wanted to be happy and I wanted to help someone else in my life. And at that time, and I remembered that. And so as I went through life in this reevaluation process, always trying to figure out what's my purpose, I actually kept coming back to that very simplistic 2 items in terms of my purpose. And so over time, as you grow and you develop as an adult, you start really trying to dig deeper. You go through all these books and programs, and every single time it came back to those 2 very simple things for me. The reevaluation process, then you start setting different goals that help you achieve that. But at the end of the day, you stay really focused on what is your ultimate north and what makes you tick. And it takes different forms as you go through life. I will tell you that the reevaluation every 5 years I learned from my mother, I didn't learn that until I was an adult. I actually didn't even know that that's what she did. But then as I reflected, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember you did this or you did that. For my mother, her simple goal sometime was, hey, I want to pay off my house by X date. I want to make sure my children graduate high school. I want to make sure they go to college. So those were most of her goals anchored around her children. And then also her financials and then making sure that she was established for the future, such that she could, live out a great life. And, my mom's going to be 78 this weekend. And because she was so goal driven and focused and reevaluating and readjusting along the way, I think she's, really in great shape because of that and able to enjoy, a really good life. And she's worked really, really hard to get to this point. So watching that, it just becomes part of what you naturally do. Um, my mother, at the end of every school year, we always went out and we had lunch. And I do it with my own children to this day. And she would ask, "So what are your goals for next year for school?" So everything is goal driven with my mom.
Mhm.
And it could just be something really simple. It doesn't have to be really big, but it just becomes an innate part of how I think and just what I do.
How old are your children?
My daughter is 20 and my son is 16.
And if I was interviewing them about you,
Uh,
what do you think they would say something similar?
they would, they really would. They would definitely say about at the end of every school year. And even in college, we still have this lunch once my daughter comes home. So all of us go out, my husband and my two kids, and we, by the end of the lunch, I always say, well, I'm going to ask you guys, so what are your goals for next year? And every year we have the exact same conversation. I'll give you another great story. When the night before my daughter was supposed to leave for college, I shared with her, so again, very goal driven. My husband and I, this is when she was a baby, we laid out what type of person we wanted to see coming out at the other end of 18, for example, like high school. And in that, it really had nothing to do with education. It talked about the type of person we wanted to grow and develop. So everything we did was aligned around that vision and mission. And so we had never shared that with her or my son, and it became the same set of goals for my son. And so right before she was going to go to college, I took a photo of it the night before and shared it with her. And she and my son looked at my husband and I and said, "Oh my God, these two are really crazy. And they have like genetically engineered us." So they would say that, both of my parents are very purpose driven and goal driven. And what I did share with her, besides giving her the photo, the last piece I said to her is, so we've now mapped this out and laid this out for you. It is now time for you to do the same for yourself moving forward. Our job is done in terms of doing that piece. And hopefully when you see how we set this long-term goal out there, you'll do the same for yourself.
Wonderful. I love your clarification too about the purpose doesn't change that much, right? But it's
Right.
how
Exactly.
you get there. That's important.
Yep. Yep.
So when you're working with, when you're coaching or you're mentoring somebody or sponsoring somebody, are the strategies different in any way about how to help them try to align with their purpose? Is there anything that comes out differently in the workplace?
It does. I mean, first and foremost, I always start with asking people, because I find when you use the word purpose or passion, there's so many books and articles that people get nervous actually, and they're actually not even sure. And some just want to make something up and just so it sounds like they had something great to say. So what I've tweaked over the years is I now actually start off and I ask people, what gives you energy? Because when you start having that dialogue, a person can actually answer that very easily. And generally, what gives you energy tends to be the things that you are passionate about. So then you can start using the word passion after you help them evolve through that. And they start getting aha moments and start connecting dots. But the goal with coaching is to get them to connect the it's not for you to help them connect the dots. And then way down the road, after you get that piece done, then you can start getting into some goal setting and things like that. But first, you just got to get people to get clear about, what gives them energy? Why do they wake up every day? And as simple as that question is, it is really, really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I can feel it just you saying it. Are there other things that are at that level for you that you think about when you're coaching somebody that's, that important that you want them to focus on?
Yeah. I do try to get them to focus on themselves. And especially, not to be stereotypical, but I find that especially for females.
Mm.
And I always say at the core of things, we're so used to giving of ourselves that that's sometimes why we can't find, or we don't think we know our passion, because we're so busy helping others achieve their goals or their passions. So I always do try and take a step back and have people put themselves first in the dialogue. There's a whole bunch of different exercises you can do to do that, but normally it's just a series of questions that I'm asking them. But that is what I have found is I got to get people to put themselves first. And
Wow.
that's a hard thing to do.
That says a lot, actually, that you have to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's not natural. And I'm saying it as if I've done it my whole life. I have not. To be very frank. I mean, I'm able to have this dialogue and I give examples of how I didn't. I wasn't putting myself first. And whether it be you're putting the company you're working for first, whether it be putting your family first, or whether it be whatever organization that you're involved in. And you realize it's kind of like the analogy of, when you're on a plane and the whole oxygen mask.
Mhm.
You've got to put your mask on first for you to be able to help someone else. You can't
Mhm.
help others if you are constantly just giving, giving, giving. But
Mhm.
once you're clear about that and you put yourself first, it is actually magic that happens, and you're able to find, from a corporate standpoint, opportunities that really you are giving your full self, your authentic self, because you're really clear about your desires. You're not following others' desires. I think early in your career you tend to, and that's okay. But then as you start to become more sure and understand who you are, you eventually start to realize how to put yourself first. And when you put yourself first, you then start focusing on those things that are important to you, and you look for the intersection of what's important to you and what's important, for example, to the company that you're working for.
So, would you do me a favor and call me every morning and remind me of that?
Too funny. Too funny.
I mean, it's such a message that resonates. It's really,
Yeah.
really wonderful.
Another half I do want to add to that is
Mhm.
there are two mantras that I live by. And I'll say
Mhm.
it from coaching or just friends. First one is, you are where you are supposed to be, and everything happens for a reason. And they're not meant to say just kind of sit and wallow in whatever's happening to you, but be in the moment. So part of also focusing on yourself, you got to live in the moment and say to yourself, don't keep second guessing. Oh, I didn't deserve to be here. I'm not even sure kind of why that happened, or honestly getting too full of yourself in terms of where you may be. That keeps you very grounded and keeps you in the moment. And when you stay in the moment, that's actually where the magic can happen. Now, that's not without going back to the first conversation. You still have your goals out there, but it keeps you very grounded when you keep those two. So when things are going good or even going bad, you say to yourself, I am where I'm supposed to
It's really wise. And it does make me think about, in this moment, this long COVID moment, we have been living through, we
be. Yeah.
know that many people have gone through a reevaluation process. You reevaluate on an ongoing basis, but I'm wondering if there's a way in which this experience has changed your priorities or perspectives.
Yeah. I think if any, the word that comes to mind first is gratitude. So it has truly made me very thankful for the simplest of things, that I think I was moving so fast, being very goal driven, and being very focused, that you kind of forget some of the simple things. And I think this pandemic has really enabled all of us to take a step back. Um, I think most, either know of or have a close person that was directly impacted and perhaps even passed as a result of COVID. So that alone just stayed you for a moment, to be very frank. And then just your own fragility of life, because we're all susceptible to this and this COVID. Um, and it really makes you take a step back and say, what are the simple things I like? So I'll give you two things that I started doing a lot more. I love to read. I'd gotten to the point I was so busy, I wasn't reading. I mean, I was doing like some audiobook podcasts, but I love to read. So I actually started reading more books. I mean, I was home. The other thing is, I used to always play chess with my brother. He always beat me. He was phenomenal. And in the pandemic, sometimes looking for simple things. So my son and I started playing chess. The piece that I didn't even realize is how good my son was at chess, because I wasn't playing a lot of chess. So you just look at those simple things where before maybe we do some, electronic type of thing or movie, but you went back to the simple things that you did as a child.
Yeah, yeah, nice. I can't not ask you if you have any books you'd recommend that you've read
There,
lately.
yes. So there are two. There's one that I'm reading called Cast, and so which has been just eye-opening, and with all that's happening from a diversity and inclusion perspective, I think it's a phenomenal book. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, but I am just drawn into it. Um, there was another book called Deep Work. I think it's by Cam Newton. I can't remember the full name of the author. I learned about it from a training class that I was in this year, and it really talks about taking that time to actually really be in that moment, think a little bit deeper. We have so many distractions, and so that has been really helpful, because also with COVID, working from home, you're just going, 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 and you might be multitasking. You're sitting in front of a screen all day, but you're probably not as effective as when you're in the office, where maybe you take a break and you walk through the hallway, you have a conversation with someone. So you step away for a while, where I found that I wasn't doing that, but that book was phenomenal, really game changing.
Very interesting. I want to read Cass too. That's Isabel Wilkerson.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yep, yep, yep.
Uh, so just to think about the COVID moment, just one moment more. We know the unique pressures that it has put on many working women, especially working mothers or working women who are caring for other family members. I'm curious, I know it's a very, very big question that is an urgent and complex one we have to figure out. But what are some of the things that you think organizations need to be thinking about in order to help address, what this has revealed as to kind of be an untenable pressure on women?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the flexibility, we've got to address more flexibility in the workplace. I know my company is pretty generous in terms of their flexible work-life balance types of things. But we've got to give the flexibility for folks, because at the end of the day, there's a job that you need to accomplish. Whether you accomplish that job, I don't know, 8 and 12 or whatever the times are, is it's probably irrelevant as long as it meets whatever deadline. So I think we've allowed a lot more flexibility, not even from a time perspective, location. So probably roles that we didn't think you could be remote, we're now more than open to have you being remote. You look for new ways of working. We're using technology a lot more. But the other flip side of it as working moms is that you are constantly on. And that's the balance that I still think we need to strike a bit more. I do think there's more on the plate now, actually. And so that prioritization is really necessary. I'm fortunate, as I mentioned earlier, the age of my children, so they're self-sufficient. I mean, one's in college. I have many friends with very young children, and it has been extremely difficult, because now you are the teacher, you're the coach, because whether it be, because you've got to get some kind of movement or exercise. Meanwhile, you're still trying to hold down a job, especially if you're in a household with two working parents. So I do think we still need to come up with some additional solutions to help working families, especially working families, whether you have young children, whether you have a child with special needs, but something where now you as a parent have to invest and do a bit more than perhaps you were doing previously. I do think we need to provide some more resources from that standpoint across the board. But I do see how there's some improvements being made as it relates to especially remote working.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll be talking about this topic for a while, huh?
Yes.
So let me move on with you to the topic of leadership, because I know that many people in our community really care about that. Our leaders are always thinking about how to develop And you have a particular kind of philosophy that I believe you ascribe to in how you think about leadership. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in servant leadership, but it goes back to, if I go back to my purpose in terms of helping others. So if you really want to help others, you got to lead from behind, and you've got to grow them and develop them. And really, servant leadership kind of takes the traditional model and turns it upside down. So you don't have this leader at the top and then the pyramid grows at the bottom. You have this huge base of employees at the top and out in front, and the leaders there behind, encouraging and coaching and developing. And so I really do firmly believe in that. I begin and end everything with people. Um, and sometimes to a fault. And when I say to a fault, I don't think to a fault, but you can sometimes get feedback that it's to a fault. So it's striking that balance. But I believe when you lead with servant leadership, you really get more as an outcome.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to learn more about that because it is I mean, you didn't invent that. That is
No, I
yeah.
did not. No, I'm just using that terminology. I did not coin it. Yes. There are many books even about it.
Yeah. Okay. It's very interesting. So there's lots more I'd love to ask you about, but I see that we're at time. So let me just wrap up with asking you what I always love to ask somebody at the end, which is what is inspiring to you about working women in the workplace right now?
Yeah. My very simple answer is seeing many women in the workplace. And I'm not that old, but I'm an engineer by degree. So I'm used to being in environments where there aren't people that look like me. Very, very few, going all the way back to college. And even frankly speaking, if I look at classes that I would take in engineering, and this is in the late 80s, early 90s, and forget about race or ethnicity, I'm just speaking gender. Very, very few women in the engineering and science, STEM fields. And so in the workplace, now you're seeing more and more women in these fields. And so that's what's honestly inspiring every time I see another female, or I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm not the only female in the room. That inspires me without question. Now, is there more to be done? Absolutely. We've got to feed that pipeline, and we've got to start early. Like, feeding the pipeline doesn't start when someone graduated from college or when someone, is an entry level in a company. It actually started when they were a little girl and they were trying to decide what fields they'd like to go into, and that someone gave them an opportunity. And that's what happened with me through a variety of programs that I went to, starting in middle school, where I could see other women, whether it be leading a major lab at the University of Pennsylvania that I got a chance to work in, or whether it be, leading major units of businesses where I got a chance to be an intern in. So we've got to continue to have those role models, because the more we see it, the more we want to be it. So that's why my simple answer is just seeing women in the workforce more and more, especially in the STEM space, really inspires me.
Well, and there you are being it for others. So
thank you.
Well, Denise Powell, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Merck for supporting the conferences for women. It was delightful to speak with you.